there in the chat window. Let me know if anybody has any questions. We're going to be going through some really cool stuff here today, so looking forward to it. And maybe while we're waiting, Billy, if you wouldn't mind, I always like to kind of get a feel for maybe what people are looking to learn here today. Did you have a specific reason for joining, a specific need that you're looking to fill that we can talk through today?
If they called yesterday and asked if I wanted to be a part of the learning opportunity, I said sure, and here I am. So I don't really know much about it. I don't know if maybe this might have been something that our last IT manager had talked to them about before me, but he left. So I really just like, okay, I'll be there. So
Got it. Absolutely. Well, happy to have you here, Bill. Billy, and of course, let me know if you have any questions at any point in time.
okay.
Again, we still got a couple minutes before everybody even jumps in here. So maybe Yeha, I know you joined us second. Is there anything specific you're looking to cover today? Anything specific you want me to go through that you're interested in learning about today?
No, to be honest, I just want to learn more about 360, Microsoft 360 security.
Okay. Do you guys currently have that for your business today?
No.
Got it.
We use Microsoft Teams, but we don't use the 360.
Okay, so do you guys have Office or do you guys have Microsoft 365?
No, we have Office.
You have Office. Okay, got it. Yeah, we'll talk about some great things today. I appreciate it. Awesome. For everybody else who just joined us here today, I did want to let you know, I'll go ahead and share this link here in the chat window one more time. This is an opportunity for you to be able to go ahead and actually launch a demo environment for the lab today. So you can see I'm sharing my screen. This is what the demo environment would actually look like. But the link that I just sent you will take you to this page. Okay, it'll say customer immersion experience right here at the top. And really all you have to do is type your name in here in the name section. And then whichever one of these personas is available, you'll be able to go ahead and click launch persona. And again, get that black screen, that demo environment that I was just showing you all. So let me know if anybody's having any issues. Let me know if anybody's having any problems. I see someone's been able to launch Alan. I go to page 2 here. So far, it looks like only one of us has been able to get in the lab. So please, if you want to be able to have that hands-on experience for today, very important that you're able to launch that. Does anybody have any questions for me about launching the lab or anything of that nature here before we get started? Again, I'm probably going to give it a couple minutes here just to make sure everybody can get situated. We can get ready to go here. But, this is a great opportunity for you to be able to ask us any questions you might have. Okay, no worries. I'll continue to ask questions in here in the meantime while everybody gets situated. Maybe Justin, if you wouldn't mind sharing, is there something specific you want me to touch on today? Something specific you're looking to learn? I just want to make sure I can make this as impactful as possible. Anything I can help with? Okay, I think it looks like Justin's probably busy. Steve, how about yourself? Are you looking to learn something specific today that I can make sure to cover? Anything about Microsoft 365 security in general?
Well, we're a G3 customer, and we've always been flirting with G5 despite its expense, and I haven't really been able to make the case for that. So maybe I'll pick up something that'll convince somebody to spend the extra money.
I love it. Yeah, definitely. Hopefully, I'm going to be going through a lot of different things here in E5, so definitely looking forward to it. What's something that actually be helpful for me here, you guys, is I want to get started in a few minutes. If you could let me know in the chat window if you've been able to launch this demo environment, that would really help because I just want to make sure no one's having any trouble before we get started here. Again, I'm going to go ahead and launch this link into the chat window. All right, looks like Billy's good to go. He's in his Alan. Awesome. So again, the link is in the chat window for all of you. All you have to do when you go ahead and get here to this page is you go ahead and you type your name in here in the name section. And then what you do is you go ahead and once you type your name in, you'll notice all of these different open demos. You can actually just click on launch persona and it'll go ahead and launch it. So it looks like somebody's been able to launch Deborah. See, Billy's been able to launch Alan. If I go here to page 2, somebody launched Grady as well. So this is awesome. Just kind of a little intro here before I pass it over to the Cambay team, just to kind of give us an introduction here. I just want to let you know what we're planning on doing today, so that we're all on the same page. Okay, so we're planning on doing what's called a Microsoft Customer Immersion Experience. Really, at the heart of this experience is the ability for you to not only listen and hear me talk about security, but also be able to hopefully touch and feel these services that are included inside of the security program that I'll be going through today. Now, this is meant to be as interactive as you want it to be. I think more questions are always a good thing. I think more questions elicit responses and conversations that all of us would benefit from. So I highly encourage it. If at any point in time you want to go ahead and raise your hand, you want to put something in the chat window, you just want to go ahead and unmute and ask me a question, I love that. I'll probably be picking on individual people inside of the session if no one has any questions, just for feedback, just to keep engagement up. I'll also be sending out some polling questions as a way to hopefully, continue our conversation and help us learn from one another. So I'm super excited to be here. I think this is going to be a great experience for everybody. And more than anything, I just want to let you know we're here for you. We're here to help you in whatever you need. And I'm hoping that today you can take away some very relevant information that can help you and your business succeed when it comes to security. So, I think with that being said, assuming nobody has any questions about the demo environment, I'd love to pass it over to David and Ovid if you guys want to do a quick introduction here on Cambay and what we can do. Let me go ahead and quickly just pull this over for you guys, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning and afternoon, everybody. My name is Dave Aiken. I'm a Senior Director of Sales for Cambay Services. I'd like to give you a brief introduction of our company. Next slide, please. We're exclusive Microsoft shop. We offer services around Dynamics, Microsoft 365, including SharePoint and Teams and Azure. We provide business intelligence services and analytics services, also managed infrastructure services. Finally, we provide customized engineering and application development services as well. Next slide, please. We support all three Microsoft clouds. We're a Microsoft managed cloud and gold provider, one of the few partners that does support all three clouds and has expertise around all three clouds. We have targeted accelerators in each of these areas that can pinpoint specific things for quick analysis and improvements. This enables us to provide comprehensive solutions for all of your Microsoft related needs.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, David. I think, more than anything, something I want to highlight is just, you can see our breadth of capabilities here just comes from our breadth of experience, right? Working with different organizations to provide a variety of different needs that can help you accelerate your business, hopefully be more profitable, be more secure, and ultimately get better at what you do. As we kind of go through this session here today, I'm hoping that, you're going to be able to have some wow moments, some moments where, you're able to understand really the capabilities and the power that comes hand in hand with the Microsoft ecosystem. So let me start there really quickly, okay? Because what I want to quickly get through here is I just want to show you, or just kind of speak to a little bit around security and how the landscape has changed over time. Because, as we're progressing towards a more cloud-centric business, what you'll notice is that security hand in hand is changing with that as well. It's not about building a layer of protection necessarily between this one location where your data is stored. It's about building a comprehensive layer of protection that's focused on identities, it's focused on endpoints, it's focused on managing the locations where you potentially have places of need when it comes to security. And so there's a lot of layers to this, right? I mean, I think one of the biggest reasons I love Microsoft is because we're constantly innovating, we're constantly changing, we're updating, we're making things better every single day. And what's important to understand about that is cloud security has also changed the game in the sense that everything has increased in terms of speed, right? Things are changing on a weekly, on a monthly, on a yearly basis that really is important to the overall context that is security inside of the cloud. And so I just want you guys to keep that in mind, because if you haven't done some type of work recently, you haven't done anything in the near term in regards to security, I promise you, you're probably going to be able to find some holes and find some opportunities or weak points that you can leverage as a way to get better when it comes to your security program. So we're going to be talking today about really a generalized overview of a lot of the key points and metrics that Microsoft is looking for in regards to security. And I'm hoping that I can show you some of the things that you might be able to think about integrating inside of your environment as well. So again, I encourage as much interaction, as many questions, as many open dialogues as you want. And we can go ahead and get started here today. And what I'm going to focus in right away, and I want to make sure this point is very clear, is that when we're talking about security in the context of the cloud, one of the most important and critical pieces that you need to be thinking about is identities. Okay. Now, given that we're not building this fence right between our data and the outside world, we're accessing data from a variety of different places, from a variety of different devices. We need to be able to say that without a shadow of a doubt, we know each individual who's accessing what information from what device, from what location, right? And the very important piece of that is that if I can't prove that Steve was the one that accessed this information, well, I now have a situation where I don't really have control over where my data or who my data is interacting with. And that is very, very risky, right? We want to have a complete contextual understanding of who's accessing what, again, from what device, from what location. And so one of the most important foundational principles we absolutely need to be thinking about here is this concept of multi-factor authentication. I'm hoping this is something that, all of us have already integrated, all of us have already given some thought to and made a piece of our security program. However, I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll here, like I mentioned, just to get some feedback from everybody who's here on the call, because I will tell you, typically, I'm doing these labs consistently. And what you'll notice is that even though MFA is a very relevant topic, it's something that, has already been very, very widespread in terms of adoption. There's still a lot of us who haven't quite done this yet. And what's important here to understand is that if we have not, we are adding extreme, I'm not talking little amounts, I'm talking about extreme levels of risk to our security. And the reason for that is because if we don't have something like MFA in place, I can't say without a shadow of a doubt that this exact individual is accessing this information. And that in turn tells me that, again, I don't have full control over how my data is being accessed from the users inside of my business or maybe outside of my business. So let me go ahead and just show you here a visual just to kind of walk you through this. So, the example I'm going to start with here, I'm going to go ahead and just open up an incognito window. Okay, and the reason I'm going to do that is because I don't want to automatically be signed in already to one of my accounts. Okay, I have an account here that I have basically created that's got MFA enabled. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in here. And I think the point that I'm trying to make, okay, phishing, we're going to talk about that later on today. One of the most, important things we need to make sure we have a good grasp on. Well, one of the things that we really focus on in that front, right, is how are we protecting the credentials that are associated with these accounts inside of Microsoft. Well, the thing here is that if somebody gets my credentials and I don't have MFA in place, well, guess what's going to happen? That's all they need to get access to my tools. We're trying to balance security with productivity, right? We don't want to make it too tough on the users to be able to use their tools, but we also don't want to make it so, so open that it's easy to get access to things without having, without being the right individual. right? And so the point that I'm trying to make here is if I don't have MFA in place, I just need my credentials, I sign in, and given that we're trying to balance that productivity, I have the single sign-on feature, which gives me access to my entire suite of tools. Now, if I can confirm without a shadow of a doubt that the right person is accessing that information, then that's perfect. That's a great balance. But if I don't, and I can't confirm that by using a second form of authentication, well, now if somebody gets in, they have access to all of the information that that user has access to. And, this is just going to provide unnecessary levels of risk here. So let me just quickly show you here. I'm going to go ahead and sign in here with these credentials. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and sign in here with my password. Now, what's important to understand here is that, again, if I didn't have MFA in place, all I would need to do would be to press sign in, and that would be it. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to quickly go ahead and share my screen on my phone just to go ahead and actually show you what happens assuming you have MFA in place. Now, this is what I personally recommend. Okay, I want people to be using the Authenticator app, not necessarily the text message or the phone call. That's better than nothing. But the Authenticator app, in my opinion, is the best MFA tool you can use because now we're also integrating credentials with some form of biometric authentication. And it's very, very difficult to copy facial recognition or a fingerprint scan, for example. Adds, again, another layer of security that's paramount to our information. So let me go ahead and quickly share my screen here. I'll start the broadcast. And then what I'm going to do, as I'm actually doing that, I'm going to go ahead and actually sign in here with my credentials. So let me go ahead. Let me know if you guys can see my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So let me go ahead. I'm going to click sign in here on the web. Take a look at what just happened. Just got an authenticator sign in. Okay, so now how this is integrated. Okay, so I go ahead and I approve this. You see the facial ID recognition, and I'm in. So I can show you now, and I'll share my screen now here on my desktop so you can take a look here. I now have been able to go ahead and sign in and get access to my account. Previously, it wasn't letting me, right? Because I needed that second form of authentication. But because I have MFA in place, what have I now done? Well, I have now confirmed without a shadow of a doubt that Andres, the individual with this account, has the appropriate credentials. And with the Authenticator app, I can monitor every single time those credentials are accessed or being used to access an account. And in order for that to actually work, I need to manually approve it, and I need to do some type of biometric authentication. This is next level security, but it's a type of security that can really optimize the way that you do business. Okay, very, very important. I know for some of us this may be, just a simple foundational principle, but if we have not done this, if this has not been something that has been a part of our strategy, we are absolutely putting ourselves in major risk. Does anybody have any questions on MFA? Any thoughts they'd love to share? Anything that I can go through before we move on to this next section here? Okay, so I can check the poll here. Looks like the majority of us have already enabled this. That's awesome. I'm very happy to hear that. I think that is a great first step. Again, we got to make sure we have the foundation in place to then be able to take advantage of some more complex, more detailed forms of security. I'll go ahead and I'll get into this next piece, okay? And again, this is going to be the last piece, I think, before we really get into some more hands-on portions here. And, what I'm going to go into next is, okay, we talked about authenticating identities, right? But the situation here is not necessarily about accessing overall accounts now. Now I want to transition this conversation more so to accessing information that might be, for example, on a personal device, might be, for example, on a business device, but not for business purposes, right? What are some of the protections that we can put in place for those situations? Because as many of us know, right, what's happened over the last year has really fundamentally changed, I think, in my opinion, how business is going to be run going into the future. Not necessarily because the world's falling apart, but I think we're going to be more inside of this hybrid workforce scenario where we'll be in the office, we'll be at home, we might be using a variety of different devices. And so we want to make sure that we have very granular control over the data that's being accessed on those different devices in those different locations. So let me talk about here some app protection policies that we can look into, right? I'll give you some examples here. And again, I just want to show you some examples that you might be thinking about in regards to your own security program. So again, this is just for visual purposes, but let me go ahead and drag this over so you can see this. Okay, 1 second. All right, here we go. All right, so the idea here is we're looking at something before work, okay? And the reason for that is we've got an organization that, again, has this flexible workforce. And so, you know, some of us, like myself, first thing I do as soon as I wake up, I go ahead and I basically take a look at my phone, right? I go ahead and look at my phone, see if I've got any updates or any information that's relevant in regards to my email, in regards to my Teams, in regards to a variety of different things, right? This can really extend to whatever application we're looking to do. But the idea here is, again, we're now accessing this information on an unsecured device that is not managed by the organization. And so as opposed to being able to monitor the entire device like we can with company approved laptops, for example, we're going to have to be more creative in how we're protecting the data. And in this case, what I think is very relevant and really, useful to see is that we can leverage, again, the power of biometric authentication to really guide us inside of our security. So, the idea is, again, you wake up, you take a look at the phone, you see here, okay, I want to see if I've got any Outlook messages, but take a look. Before I actually get access to Outlook, I actually have to go ahead and do a form of biometric authentication through a fingerprint scan in order for me to actually be able to access this information. Because again, we need to be creative in the ways that we're accessing the data, especially if we're using it from unapproved devices. And so how can we do this in a way that's secure? Well, I know now that I am blocking access to Outlook unless you go ahead and verify that you are the right individual to be accessing this information. And on top of that, because I'm able to control that application, I can actually do a remote wipe of the data if the phone is stolen, if it's lost. And I think that provides, again, that overall security that we really need to make sure we can protect the information that is driving our business forward. Okay, so that's one example, protecting applications and data ultimately that's living on those applications on personal devices. However, what if we're inside of a situation where we are still using business devices, but we might not necessarily be using them in the way that we intended them to be used. Maybe, I can ask the group here, maybe Steve, if you wouldn't mind sharing, have you ever heard of shadow IT before? Is this something you're concerned with actively today?
Yeah, of course. And BYOD only makes it more intense.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. So when we're thinking about shadow IT, we're thinking about, if I was going to make it really simple, basically our users or our individuals inside the organization not necessarily following the rules that we put in place, or basically complicating our security because, they're doing things outside the bounds of how we want to actually have them do their work. So I'm going to give you an example here, right? This is again, personal device, right? But what if I've got a company approved device, okay? And in this situation, okay, the quote unquote example is, let's say we've got Finan, and Finan is going ahead and he's opening up his device and he wants to actually plan a vacation because Finan works like, 80 hours a week and he needs to go ahead and take some time off. And so the idea would be here, he's trying to look for the best deals, and I don't blame him, right? He wants to go ahead and use Trivago in this situation. Let me see if I can show you here, to go ahead and actually download that to see if they can find some really good deals for this quote unquote vacation. But what's the problem here? Okay, what's the issue? Well, the issue is that we're trying to find out this information on our business device. And so what are we doing inherently is we're adding additional risk. Okay, Microsoft operates from this concept of zero trust, where everything is verified, nothing is automatically trusted. And the reason for that is we're trying to minimize risk as much as possible. And if we're in a situation where we're allowing everything to happen, we're allowing pretty much all users to use their business devices that have very secured and very important data living on them, if they can just use these devices however they like, Well, think about all the other potential risks that we're bringing into the business. And so these are the type of, again, app protection policies you need to be thinking about. Okay. How am I managing the way that people are actually using this, right? Maybe as opposed to him actually being able to download this computer, as soon as Finon actually does this work, guess what? We went ahead and we blocked it because we said, I've got 15 applications that I know all the different users inside of my organization leverage for business purposes. Everything else is for leisure, it's for personal reasons. Again, we're adding more layers of potential problems to the business if we're allowing them to use it however they like. And so we need to be very prescriptive. We need to be very forward thinking in terms of how we're actually protecting this type of information. Because if we don't, what's ultimately going to happen is we're going to put ourselves in a position where we're adding additional risk that's just simply unnecessary. So maybe I'll go ahead and ask, Abdul, if you wouldn't mind sharing, do you currently have these types of app protection policies in place? Have you thought about things like this? Is this something you've looked into? If you wouldn't mind giving feedback, I'd love to hear from you. And you're on mute, Abdul, just in case you didn't realize. Okay, Billy, would you mind sharing with us? I'm just trying to get some feedback here from the team. Is this something you guys are currently doing today? Is this something you thought about?
It's something that we've thought about. I work for a company that doesn't have very security focused. My boss was not security focused at all, and neither was the CFO or anyone. No one seemed to really care, and they like to kind of, at least for management, maybe not for everyone.
Yeah.
But your business devices, as long as it's not during work hours, are pretty much also personal devices in a lot of cases. It's a lot of family that work here as well. Once you're up in management and stuff, so it's a bit unique. Same thing with, I'm the one person that does not have multi-factor authentication on right now in here, and so that's something that is on our plan. That's one of our next things on the agenda for this year. Is we actually just got fully migrated over to Office 365 from an on-site Exchange server, and so our next step is multi-factor authentication, and it's going to be a slow process. We're probably only going to be moving like 5 users a month. But the new IT manager here, he came from a company that just also enabled multi-factor authentication through Office 365. So hopefully it'll go smooth and everyone will understand it, and we'll figure out a good way that works with everyone here, because we're a construction company and a lot of the people are not technology focused at all.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Billy. And I think you're bringing up a great point here that, security progress is not always a 1 week endeavor, right? I mean, it's something that it's just progressing over time. But, at the same time, we also don't want to make it too of a slow process where we get ourselves in trouble. But happy to hear that, especially because you're saying it's tough, sometimes to really like bring security home. Maybe that's more of a conversation where they need to understand the risks, right? And the potential loss of profit that comes from,
Yeah, it's definitely something that every step we've taken to make things more secure, whether it's password expiration or anything like that, it's been a process with upper management to get them to give the okay. We're like, look at all these risks. We have to do big risk management assessments and all this other stuff, and then they're like, okay, we can go forward with this. I see your point. It's like, yeah.
Well, you have to be the steward, Billy, and I'm happy you
Yeah.
are. Appreciate it. Thanks for sharing. All right. Great. So I wanted to talk about some of the foundational things here, just kind of walk you through some of these, policies, some of these rules that you might want to think about integrating into your own environment. But again, this is just a drop in the bucket. I mean, there's just so many other layers here that we can really get into. And this is why I want to transition this here towards now the demo, because what I can actually show you here inside of the demo is, okay, I've got a current security infrastructure. Okay, and inside of this current security infrastructure, I have enabled X, Y, and Z. how does that, protect me as an organization? Where am I currently situated when it comes to my security posture? And maybe what are some of those steps that I can go ahead and start taking in order to do this? And what I'm talking about here is this concept of Microsoft Secure Score. Has anyone ever heard of Secure Score before by any chance? All right. Well, then I think this should be really fun then. If nobody's heard about it just yet, I think this is going to be awesome. So if you're here in the demo, this is what I want you to do. Okay, so let me go ahead and open up this demo for you. Okay, so you should hopefully see this black screen right here. That's basically showing you this demo lab. Okay, now what I want you to do is, assuming you're here in the demo with me, go ahead and double click here on this Microsoft Edge icon. When you do that, assuming you've already been able to, is the app block on the last side of the function of Intune or configure? So Steve is asking, is the app installation block on the last slide a function of Intune or configuration manager? Great question, Steve. So assuming you're cloud-based, it would be done through Intune because Intune's all about app protection and mobile device management. Does that answer your question, Steve? If you have more of a hybrid environment, more maybe, if you're on-prem, for example, Intune is meant for the cloud. So in that case, you wouldn't necessarily be using that. You might be using something like the configuration manager. But assuming you're in the cloud, you're inside of Microsoft 365, you would be using Intune to do this work. We're very hybrid, but have utterly abandoned configuration manager. All right, well, if you're hybrid, that means you do have a cloud focus, Steve. So I would focus in on Intune. That would probably be your best bet here to secure most of the resources, especially if you're storing them in a cloud-based environment. We can definitely, continue this conversation offline if you're worried about how you're using Configuration Manager for your on-prem resources. Happy to have that conversation. But I would probably try and go more cloud because I'm just a fan of the cloud myself. Okay, got it. Yeah, so you replace it with Datto. Yeah, I think via cloud. Okay, so you've got some other services in there that you're integrating here. I'll honestly tell you, because of the fact, especially if you're inside of Microsoft 365, I think Intune really wraps in well with what you're already doing, and you're already paying for it inside of the subscription. So, that's probably a conversation for later on. But again, I would probably try and leverage Intune as much as possible. If there's some specific tools and services you like with Datto that you don't think are available through Intune, totally understand. Microsoft isn't always necessarily going to be your entire security posture. And that's actually something that I can touch on here today. We're G3, so we don't have Intune. Okay, so you got an E3 subscription. I got it. Well, I'll tell you this, Steve. E5 comes with a lot of really cool things. One of them being, the very high level use of Intune. So hopefully maybe I can show you, and, given how much you're probably already paying for these other services, might be very well balanced. Plus all the add-on services besides just Intune that you get from E5. Now, with that being said, assuming you're here in the lab, let me show you and kind of talk about what we're talking about here, Steve, with specifically these different services you can enable. If you're here inside of the demo, what I want you to do is I want you to go to security.microsoft.com. Okay, I can go ahead and I can input this here. Security.microsoft. Okay. You should have hopefully been able to confirm your setup and sign in here to this online office.com account. Again, this is all through the demo. But if you wanted to look at this for your own organization, feel free to do so. You can just type in security.microsoft.com. But, I did want to provide you this demo if you don't necessarily have access to this information. What you'll notice here inside of this basically dashboard environment is this is actually the Microsoft 365 Security Center. Okay, so this is really going to be where you're going to be able to monitor, you're going to be able to manage a lot of the different security policies and rules that you put in place for your organization, right? You can see here, maybe I should zoom in here just a little bit. So you can see here, right, I've got a lot of different things, right? I've got places I can actually look at my incidents and alerts. I can do some hunting to try and find out more about these potential incidents. I have threat analytics. I've got a secure score, which is what I'm going to talk about here in just a second. I've got investigations I can make, attack simulation training, which we'll talk about a little bit later on today, audits, health reports, a lot of different things that are really cool here and that have to do with your current security posture that I think are very relevant. But what I wanted to talk about here was this concept of secure score. So again, if you're here in the demo, please go ahead and click on secure score here so you can walk through this with me as well. So just to kind of give you a brief overview of really what this is and what it does. You know, I compare this, and it was explained to me this way. I thought it was funny, but it does make sense. You know, when you think about your credit score, right? It's just a history of your credit, how likely you are to pay back your debts, right? Very similar here in the context of a secure score, where we're pretty much understanding your current environment. How secure is it? What are some of the things maybe that are a part of that security score? And then maybe what are some of those actions, some of those activities, rules, policies that you can go ahead and enable that can really transform your organization into one of the top tier security firms. What you can see here is we've got different sections here in the overview, but I'm going to individually jump into each of these pieces, okay? Number one, I think most important piece of this is I want you to go ahead and select on improvement actions, okay? Is anybody having any problems getting to this location that I can help you with? Anybody having any issues? I want to make sure you can see this. Okay. So what you can see here with secure score under improvement actions, okay, you've got an overall score. And again, that score determines essentially your current security posture inside of Microsoft and the types of services and rules and policies that you've enabled that are a part of that. Now, one of the things I do want to make clear, you know, this isn't going to be everything on your entire security posture, right? For example, Steve was talking about how he's got Datto. Well, in that case, you're not going to see those tools basically here inside of your secure score represented as a piece of the score. You might be able to get some telemetry and some information and data fed into something else like Azure Sentinel, which we'll talk about later on today. But specifically here inside of your score, that's not going to be highlighted. But why is this relevant? I think this is a phenomenal first place to start, right? Where you can really evaluate, okay, based on what I'm able to do here inside of Microsoft 365 when it comes to security, what are some of the things that maybe I can go ahead and improve on, right? And let me just show you. So I'm going to jump into one of here. And you can see, right, we've got a score impact that's right here. You'll notice this is number 1, right, MFA for admin roles. And we can go ahead and select on this and find out why. So I'm going to go ahead and select on this. Okay, you can actually notice here, I've got an overview, right? So I can show, right, why this is relevant. Well, you see here, requiring MFA for admin roles makes it harder for attackers to access accounts. Admin roles have higher permissions than typical users. So if one of those is compromised, critical devices, critical data is open to attack. Very, very true. Very, very important for us to understand. Now, what you'll notice here is it goes beyond just an explanation. I can see at a glance what category, in this case, identity, this impacts. I can see what product this is going to be associated with, in this case, Azure Active Directory. I can also see what specific users are going to be impacted by this rule that's going to actually be enabled, assuming I did it, right? So I can see all these different global admins that I actually made all of these accounts will be affected because we all have very high privileges inside of this environment. And then finally, if you wanted help, if you needed basically some guidance on how to actually go about the process of implementing this, or you just want to kind of see some steps that you could take, assuming you want to handle this, well, you have that available to you as well. And so what you can see, right, is I think it's a very healthy exercise as a business to evaluate your secure score over time, right? I can see here a history. You'll notice this is the next tab. I can see how my score has progressed, how it's changed, how it's evolved. And I can also see, you know, the different types of activity that has impacted that score overall inside of my organization. And so if I can follow my trends, if I can basically have some KPIs in place that tell me, okay, I want to get to this level because of X, Y, and Z. I want to be able to have a 40% secure score. Well, we need to be able to put ourselves on a path to reach it. Again, security is not a flip of the switch. We've got a lot of different people that are involved in the decisions as to how that's actually going to be managed. And so we need to make sure we can tell the story. We can really explain the value of why this is relevant. And given that you have all these improvement actions listed out for you, you also have a path that you can take that's going to actually do this work for you. Phenomenal tool, I think, for us to continue to get better, constantly be improving. Because again, Microsoft in general, security in general, needs to always be evolving. Because, I don't know if you guys know this, but I believe it's 92% of malware attacks are polymorphic, meaning they're brand new. So, it's very, very, very fresh. Every single attack is constantly changing. And so we need to be able to evolve with that. And you'll see here, another most important piece of this is also metrics and trends, right? I can see what my current secure score is. I can go ahead and see basically how that score has changed, if it's regressed. And in my opinion, most importantly, I think this is really cool. I can even see a comparison of my organization to other organizations in my vertical or my industry. Why can I trust this data? This is a question I get all the time. Well, if you didn't know, Microsoft is global. Okay, so we pull data from companies really around the entire world. On top of that, Microsoft also operates from, I like to call it almost like a brain trust. And the reason I say that is, let's say Yeha is in, let's say New York, okay? And let's say Steve is in California, okay? And then let's say, for example, Steve is impacted by a brand new, never before seen type of security threat that is trying to basically, hack their business. Well, in that scenario, what Microsoft is going to do, they're number one, going to quarantine it. They're going to analyze it. They're going to provide a solution. And then most importantly, Microsoft is going to send that update against that type of attack to every single other customer that has that Microsoft solution. Have you ever gotten any type of security patches, security updates to, your device or your operating system, or just in general Microsoft 365? You want to enable those updates ASAP. The reason for that is if you don't, there might be some learnings and some capabilities against security threats that Microsoft is giving you based on what they've learned from across the globe. And so you're adding additional layers of risk if we are slow in the process of updating constantly. So, again, what does that really highlight in my mind? It's how things are always changing. It's how things are never the same, and how things are ultimately evolving, and we need to change with them. So again, I think Secure Score is just a phenomenal place to start, evaluate where you are, and hopefully continue to get better. I'd love to get some feedback here, though. Maybe Ashish, if you wouldn't mind, what's your experience been with Secure Score? What do you think about this? Do you have any thoughts here for the group that you'd like to share? And you're on mute, just in case you weren't aware, Ashish. Okay. How about Justin? Justin, you mind jumping in here?
We have a shy crowd today, Andre. That's what's happening.
Say that again?
I said we have a shy crowd today, I guess.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. It happens. It happens. Okay, Sheesh or Justin, how about this? Travis, I see you joined us. Travis, were you able to see the whole demo here on Secure Score? I'm curious what you think. Do you have any thoughts? Is this something you're currently using today?
I was unaware of Security Score. Looks like ours is at like an average 23, so definitely needs to be approved.
There you go. Hopefully that's a big learning. Is this something that you think leadership would be, intrigued by? Kind of curious your perspective there.
Present the information and let them take from it what they will.
Exactly. Right. That's kind of what I'm trying to get to. I think sometimes, visuals are very helpful. And I think if we can basically prove out and have specific examples as to why these are relevant and show them a roadmap to get better, I think that's always impactful, right? And this is how hopefully you can continue to get a little bit better inside of your security posture. So appreciate it, Travis. Thank you for sharing there. So, those are the first few things I kind of wanted to get through here today. Again, we're talking about identities through MFA, app protection policies, and all those other policies that can be integrated here into your secure score to give you a good understanding of your overall posture when it comes to security. Now, with that being said, there's also other layers here inside of Microsoft 365 that are very relevant as well. And one of those specifically are going to be strategic ways to protect the information that's living inside of your documents. Okay, so for example, and I've got a polling question. Do you have that strategy? Do you have an implemented strategy for document information protection? If you don't, I think I've got something that could be very helpful and very relevant to your specific, efforts in that space. As we're building out security that's holistically hoping to protect the information in our environment, one of the most, one of the most important things to think about is not only how we're protecting access to the data, but how the data in and of itself is protecting itself. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, think about Teams, think about SharePoint, think about OneDrive. Okay, all of these services are going to be cloud-based storage options. And the beautiful part of them is that they're going to be encrypted at rest and in transit. And what we mean by that is that as we're accessing that information, if you haven't been invited or been given direct access to that Teams environment, for example, you're not going to be able to access the document. However, here's another way to think about this though. What happens? Let's say I invited a team, okay? I created a team with David, Steve, and Billy, let's say. All four of us have access to these documents. Well, what happens now if Steve, for example, downloads one of those documents from that Teams environment down to their computer? Well, now the encryption is no longer living on the document because the document is now available on the device. And if he accidentally sends it out over email, if he sends it out over Teams, well, now whoever he sends it to, regardless of whether or not they're a member of the team, they have access to that document and that data. And so if we want to build in a sound security strategy, we want to be able to classify the types of information that's living inside of our environment. And if it is of utmost concern, if it is extremely relevant to keep secure, well, we want the encryption not only to be at rest right there where it's currently living, but we also want that encryption to follow the document so that even if Steve were to download the document down to his computer and send that document over email to David, or let's say to Melody because she's not a member of the team, well, Melody still would not be able to open up the document because it's encrypted in the very, the document itself is encrypted and it's constantly protecting itself. And so when I'm talking about a strategy for document information protection, I'm talking about classification. I'm talking about having encryption and marking, whatever you're trying to do here, actually follow that document. And so this is where we get into this conversation around sensitivity labels. I'd love to get some feedback here to see if anybody has heard about a sensitivity label before. Has anybody heard about this before? Anybody have any experience with classification, sensitivity labels, anything of that front? Okay, hopefully this is going to be a good experience then for you guys. So go ahead and follow along with me here. We're actually going to walk through from beginning to end an actual example of this sensitivity label that we'll be creating. So what I want you to do is, assuming you're here in the demo with me, go ahead and open up a new tab. And I want you to go ahead and open protection.office.com. So I'll show you here, protection.office.com. Okay, and I'll go ahead and I'll put this here in the chat window. Okay, Steve, classification is a huge staff challenge. I'd love to hear you kind of speak on that a little bit more, Steve, if you wouldn't mind sharing. What do you think are the main challenges here that you're facing today?
Well, I mean, from records management, archival, retention policies, it's pretty straightforward to come up with classifications. It's pretty easy to create retention policies, but it's very difficult to require staff to classify or set things like retention levels for data. I mean, even email it's just compliance is like next to zero.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So I think part of that, I think that inherently goes into what you're talking about there, Steve, is a human error that's associated with this classification and this management. Because if we allow staff to be specifically in charge themselves of basically integrating and implementing these policies, we're depending on them to not make any mistakes. And so that's one of the things that I love about Microsoft is we have a huge focus on automation. We have a huge focus on minimizing human error by integrating some solutions that can actually solve this problem without human interaction. And so these sensitivity labels, which I'm assuming, Steve, you probably are not using here today, is one of these tools that we can use as a way to classify these documents automatically without needing humans and people to be involved in that process, right? We just set the rules and the rules implement themselves. So let's go ahead and let's walk through this whole process. I want to just kind of show you this. And what we're going to be doing here today is we're going to be creating a sensitivity label that's specifically engineered and built out for classification of information that contains social security number information. So if you're here inside of this Office 365 Security and Compliance Center, go ahead and click here under classification and click here on sensitivity labels. Okay, so what you'll notice, labels are used to classify, and let me go ahead and zoom in again here. Labels are used to classify email messages, documents, sites, and more. When a label is applied, the content is protected based on the settings that you choose, right? And so in this case, what we're actually going to be doing is we're going to be actively classifying this data, but we're also going to be actively marking the data so that, you know, we can make sure that even if the right individual has access, they're careful with how they manage it. Okay, so let's say, for example, we're going to just create a brand new one. I'm going to go ahead and click here on create a label. If you want to follow along with me, please go ahead and select that as well. Okay, so once you go ahead and you select on create a label, what you can go ahead and you can do is you can give it a name, right? So in this case, we're going to make this really simple. We're just going to call this SSN protection. Then what I want you to do is just go ahead and put dash and then put the name of your demo in a person so that as we're creating these, we don't mix them up together. So SSN protection, and I'm going to put dash Megan because that's my demo account. And then I'll go ahead and I'll copy that same thing again here for the display name. And then the description is just going to be for protecting social security numbers. Okay, so again, we're trying to create here from the ground up a label that classifies any documents that have social security number information and automatically encrypts and marks that content so that only the appropriate users have access to that information. So again, SSN protection, put dash your demo name, and then you can just go ahead and put the description there for this specific policy or label, I should say. And then go ahead and here and click next. Now, you'll notice here inside of sensitivity labels, you have different scopes that you can actually enable for these labels themselves. If you have the integration built in, you can actually enable this with, you know, things like your Microsoft 365 groups, like your Teams environments, SharePoint sites, for example. We don't have the integration built out here in the demo, but you absolutely could inside of your own environment. You could also do this here through Azure Purview assets. So things like your databases, for example, can actually have this encryption capability as well. So, you know, depending on what you're trying to do this for and what layers or what scope you're trying to enable this, that's going to determine how you actually, you know, create this actual label. In this case, though, just make sure it's files and emails. So any file inside, you know, basically that any files inside of our emails or in our Office accounts should automatically be encrypted as well as in Azure. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and click next here. Now, we have some protection settings that we can decide for these files and for these emails. First one is going to be encryption. And so we automatically, for sure, we want to make sure we can control who can access this information. And number two, I also want to mark this because now even if I were to, let's say, put the mark here and Billy has access, well, Billy can't necessarily share it out. We're not worried about that because the encryption will stick with the document. But what if Billy were to just copy and paste onto a different document and send it out that way, right? If I mark it, I'm making it extremely clear. Don't take a screenshot, don't copy and paste. This is very, very secured information. So please be careful with how you handle it. Okay, so we want to do both of these. And then I want to go ahead and click next here. And so now we need to start making some decisions about, how this encryption is taking place. First thing I need to decide is who can actually access the files once this label is applied, right? So once I create this label, what individuals will still have access? So you would want to go ahead and click here on assign permissions. If this is for a specific, let's say this is HR information. So we only want to have the HR team to be able to access it. Well, I probably want to go ahead and click add users or groups and then specifically select every single person in the HR team, right? In this scenario, we're only going to worry about our own demo environments. So I'm just going to select Megan, right? If you're Patty, select Patty. If you're Miriam, select Miriam and so on, right? But in this case, right, just select yourself and I'll go ahead and add. And again, what am I doing here? I'm saying that once this label goes live, once it's been applied and once it's actually active, Megan is going to be the only person who actually has access to this information. Okay, so that's the first thing. We need to go ahead and we need to assign it, like you see here, to our own demo environments. Then we can go ahead and click next here. And now we need to decide how we're actually going to be marking content on this file, or on these files, I should say. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. And, if you're doing this for emails, you might want to use a header or a footer, right? In this case, though, this is going to be for files inside of our environment. So I'm going to go ahead and add a watermark. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to customize this text so that you absolutely cannot miss it. There's only one downside of these labels, and I don't understand why. The watermark is automatically set to font size 10. I think it's very easy to miss. It doesn't have the same impact. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put in all caps, I'm going to put confidential. And then for the font size, I'm going to make it 100. And the reason for that is it's going to say confidential in a watermark across that entire document in 100 font. You absolutely cannot miss it. And that's the whole point, right? I want to make it extremely clear that you're dealing with very sensitive information. Please be careful with how you manage it. So just go ahead and put that there and save that setting. And so now you can see we have this confidential watermark in 100 font that's going to be across the screen. And then we can go ahead and click next here. Now, Steve, to your point here, I think this is where you really see the power of these labels. Because again, we're removing human error from our thought process, from our actual implementation. Because what I want to happen here is I don't want to be able to create this label and say, okay, Travis, go ahead. Every time you interact with one of these documents, go ahead and basically enable it. I want this to use the power of AI and automation so that anytime this information is basically identified on a document, it automatically encrypts itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to definitely turn this on for auto labeling. But given that I want to do this automatically, I need to put rules in place for how this is actually implemented. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and add a condition. The condition is that the content contains, because remember, we're protecting against specific information. You notice it opens up this new box, and then go ahead and click on add. And in this case scenario, we're talking about sensitive information types, specifically social security numbers. So again, we're saying detect content that matches these conditions, that it contains a sensitive information type. And you can see here, I have an entire list of the types of sensitive information that I can protect against. In this case, you're going to have to scroll all the way down here because this will show you here, right, third from the bottom, U.S. Social Security number. You can go ahead and you can select that, and then you can click add. And so now anytime that I see information that matches a U.S. Social Security number on a document, it's going to use AI to automatically detect that, automate the actual encryption and have that process taking place so that we don't have to manually manage it ourselves. So once you have that in place, just go ahead and hit next. Because we want to have this set up, you can just go ahead all the way to the end here. You'll notice we can review our settings, right? Exactly what we're doing and what we're enabling. And then we can go ahead and actually create this label. Okay. Now, when I actually create this label, I want everybody to take a pause here if you're doing this with me, okay? Just don't click anything else just yet. Because this is the one confusing part about Microsoft if you haven't really been working here on the back end enough. And it's that when you actually create rules or labels, you actually need to enable them as well, right? You don't create a label and then it automatically gets sent out and published to the organization. You need to actively publish this label once you create it, right? So you see here under the next steps. And so the next thing that you're going to want to do is, assuming you've been able to create a label, go ahead here and select on publish this label. Okay. So now, again, we've gone through the steps of actually creating this label. We've done all that work. And so now we actually want to enable it inside of the business. So once we do that, we can go ahead and select choose labels to publish. You'll notice I have my label right here available for me. I can go ahead and select on that and select add. Once I do that, I can then go ahead and click on next here. Go ahead and decide who gets labeled to, who gets sent out to. Okay, so I want to make the difference here. Originally, if you remember when we first created the label, we decided who would still have access after the label is applied. In this scenario, what we're saying is, who do we want this label to actually work for? Who do we want this label to actively be basically created for? So in the sense of, okay, everybody who's here on the call today, we probably want to publish this label to everybody so that anytime any person is working on any document, this automatically takes place, right? So, for your own organization, you might want to just decide everybody. But in this specific example, again, we're trying to make it really simple, make it easy to understand. I'm just going to add myself. So feel free to just add your own demo environment as well. Click on done. And then this last piece here, very, very important, okay? They're going to ask you again, what are the specific settings for this policy that you're creating? Not just the label that you created. Now we're talking about an overall policy, because this label is coming from just an idea to actual implementation. So number one, the general setting is that users can actually remove labels if they want to. And so for auditing purposes, if something were to happen, for the purposes of tracking everything that happens inside of our security posture, I absolutely need them to provide a justification for why it might need to be removed. Maybe, the actual services accidentally caught something that wasn't supposed to be encrypted. Well, in that case, obviously the justification would be incorrectly applied a label. But if we don't have this justification in place, if something were to happen, information were to leak, well, now I have a record of what happened, and I'm going to be able to basically point my finger at, why this happened, hopefully find a solution to it. Okay, so very important. We want to absolutely provide justification. Second thing, we need to require them automatically to apply these labels to any documents that correlate with the rules that we just put in place. So absolutely want to require it, and we want justification if we're going to remove it, okay? And once you've been able to select both of those, you go ahead and you click next. Apply this default documents. You just go ahead and apply this default label to documents. So if you have specific documents, right, that you want to automatically apply this to right away, you could do so. In this case, not necessarily just yet. I'm just going to skip here to the end. I'll give it the same name, SSN protection. And then I'll go ahead and click next and submit this. Okay, so you can see here the settings. Label is mandatory for documents and emails. Users must provide justification to remove it. It's called SSN protection. And this is going to be published out to my user account in order for those purposes to actually take place. And I go ahead and click on submit. And you'll see now this label has now turned into an active policy, because we've got it again from ideation to actual implementation. And we now have gotten the ball rolling here for this specific concern. You'll notice some of these can take up to 24 hours to actually publish. Typically, I've been able to see this work after maybe 20-30 minutes. So we're going to hopefully at the end of the session be able to kind of just take a look at this. Steve, I'd love to get your feedback here. Now that you kind of walked through the step, you've kind of been able to see this. Is this something that's interesting to you? I mean, is this something maybe that might be able to solve the question you were asking about earlier?
No, I mean, we the tools are already pretty robust to check for things like credit card numbers, et cetera. But where we're having trouble is in the municipal space, the definition of a record, for example, it has connotations about sensitivity and about retention, and there isn't a macro that you can apply. There isn't a sufficiently robust legal definition of what constitutes a record that we can turn on to make it passive.
Got it. So there's other layers in there in that whole discussion.
I mean, a human being has to read an email and decide if it's a legal record or if it's not.
Got it. Yeah, that complicates things a little bit, huh? Just a little bit.
It does frustrate automation.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to have a further conversation on that, though, Steve, because I feel like there's got to be a way to do it. It's just got to be creative, but maybe not. But I appreciate you sharing. That's really good to know. But for everybody else, I think we can automate these processes and make it as easy to really function inside of the business as possible. I think this is all extremely, extremely relevant. So again, we've talked about identity management. We've talked about strategic management of our security. We've talked about now about information protection. One of the other things that I want to get into next, though, is this concept of email phishing attacks. Okay, I know this is probably something you've heard a lot about, but I got a question for you. And I'm hoping that we're at 100% for this one, although that's not typically what happens. Is your staff trained on how to identify email phishing attacks? This is a very popular topic for a variety of reasons. I mean, I'll give you one specific reason here. I believe the numbers are that 81% of breaches occur specifically because of an email phishing attack. Right. And so we were talking about, some of the reasons why E5 might be, a really cool option above E3. I'm going to talk about one of those here in just a second. But first, before we get there, I want to actually show you what Microsoft specifically is doing here in regards to email security. So I'm going to go ahead and go here to office.com. And what I want you to do is go ahead and just click here on the Outlook icon, because we actually have a specific example here of an email that probably is a phishing attack. Okay, so if you're here inside of Outlook, again, you just go to office.com here in the browser, you go ahead and select on Outlook, and now you can actually get access here to this demo Outlook environment. Billy says yes, but it doesn't always make it work. Still have people putting in credentials to read faxes and put their Microsoft login into a fake MS page. Yeah, Billy, it's tough. I mean, it's tough. Why is this such a big problem? Actually, let me talk about that. Billy, you bring up a phenomenal point. Well, really why? And again, this is why I was trying to automate and talk about that with sensitivity labels. It's human error. People are not perfect. We make mistakes. We're stressed. We're tired. We're not paying attention. And so if we're not practicing and we're not putting in basically, as many capabilities as possible here for security, it complicates things quite a bit. Because, there's a saying, I played sports my entire life. And one of the things that, my coaches used to always talk about, you're only as great as your weakest link. That's going to be the pinnacle of what you can reach, because if somebody's bringing you down, it's going to bring the whole team down. And it's the same exact concept here with phishing security, right? If there's one individual, one person who breaches, best practice recommendations, well, guess what? Now the entire company could be compromised. So we need to make sure we have a lot of these tools in place to try and mitigate as many of those threats as possible. So let's walk through it. Okay. What I want you to do is, if you're here inside of Outlook, go ahead and take a look for an email from Alex Wilbur. Now, number one thing you should hopefully notice here is we're looking for this email. It says important statement of work right here. Okay, so, what are some of the trainings that you can think about? Well, first of all, you need to be showing, your users what are some of the telltale signs around a potential phishing scam. Well, you can see, number one, I think it's pretty obvious. Alex Wilbur is supposed to be a member of my team. You notice he's got a picture here. Well, all of a sudden, Alex, who's supposed to be, again, a member of my team, does not have a picture here anymore. So that should be a massive red flag. But again, maybe we're tired, maybe we're not paying attention, maybe we don't necessarily see what's going on. Okay, so what else can Microsoft do for me? Well, Microsoft is going to, next step, go ahead and basically screen the email that this is coming from. Okay, this is actually telling me, take a look here. This is coming from Juno.com. Wait a second. This is supposed to be my my employee, my colleague. That should be a massive second red flag. It'll also tell you, assuming they're not on your safe senders list, you should also be able to see some type of basic information on that as well. However, again, people make mistakes. Maybe they disregard this, they don't see this, they go ahead and they don't pay attention. Okay. Now, what's the next thing Microsoft is going to do? Well, Microsoft is actually going to screen out every email that's coming through your inbox. If it recognizes malware that it's interacted with before, it's going to do this concept here that they call 0-hour auto purge. Okay. It might be difficult for you guys to read this, but I'll read this to you. Okay. It says, malware was detected in one or more attachments included with this email message. All attachments have been deleted. And so they call this zap inside of Microsoft, because what they're doing is they're zapping all of this malware that's specifically been identified inside of these different email messages. Again, some people still miss this though. Let's say they didn't see the first, red flag, different picture. They didn't see that it was not on their safe senders list, not from their organization. They didn't see that there's been malware that's been detected on this message. They don't see how this is all looking very funky. It's not looking weird. What happens if they actually end up going ahead and clicking on this link? Okay, they just decide to do it. So for whatever reason, this link's not working here, but let me show you what would actually happen. Okay, Microsoft has this concept that they call safe links. Okay, and I'll go ahead and get an image here. Because what actually is going to happen, it's going to look just like this. Okay, you go ahead here inside of this email message, you click here on this link because that's the link that they're telling you to select to go ahead and do, for example, the fax work that Billy was talking about here, to put in their, Microsoft credentials. But when they do that, if Microsoft has identified that this is not a trusted source, this is not a good idea, well, what it's going to do is it's actually going to go ahead and actually redirect that link to what they call a quote unquote safe link. Because now what you can see here is actually alerting the user that, this website has been classified as malicious. Opening it might be dangerous. It might, potentially, cause you harm. And so we're pulling out all these different layers of protection here inside of our email. We're letting you know some telltale signs of issues. We're actually actively protecting you if you select on these links. If your users continue to go past this, well, that to me just shows me that you just need to do some additional training. And that's probably where you can go ahead and invest some of your time. Some of the things, or one of the options that you might have there, and I'm going to go back here to the original Microsoft Security Center here to show you this, is under email and collaboration, we can actually do attack simulation training, which is really, really cool. It's a part of the E5 suite here. And what you're able to do here is you're actually able to create specific simulations that mirror, a real world type of phishing attack. Okay. And what you'll actually do is you'll create a simulation, you'll launch it here from scratch. And that actual simulation is going to get sent out to all the different users that are inside of your environment. And the beautiful part of this is twofold. Number one, we get to practice. So we get to give everybody an opportunity to, get used to what a phishing email would look like. Okay, I think that's very, very important. Practice makes perfect, as my coaches would always tell me. But number two, this is E5, Billy. This is E5. Number two, most important thing I think here, is you find out who your weak links are. Okay, and this is not to degrade them. This is not to be rude, not to be mean. But again, we need to identify if Travis is the guy that's always clicking on the link. Well, if I know that, I know I can go ahead and spend some more time speaking with Travis about this. And so we can create these simulations, these trainings as a way to, again, find out who are the individuals inside the organization that are putting ourselves at the highest level of risk, and how can I use that information as a way to hopefully get better at what I'm doing here when it comes to phishing and email security. Billy, you were asking about E5 or E3 or E5. Is this something you think would be pretty cool that you don't necessarily have access to today? Just kind of curious. Okay, not a problem, Billy. Just kind of want to get some thoughts here. Yes, we looked into third parties that will do something similar as well. Yeah, there is some third-party services that can do a similar service. Again, I'd say if you're already looking to do something like that, given the fact that E5 comes with a lot of other things, plus you actually have calling that you can integrate voice over IP into Teams as well. I mean, there's just so many add-on benefits that, the bundling helps you save money. So I think this is definitely a really good option to look into for sure.
So this attack simulation is only available on E5?
I believe so, yes. But I
Okay.
think you can actually add this as an add-on service. Correct me, anybody from the team, if I'm wrong about that, but I believe you can add this as just an add-on service, I believe.
We're
Have to double
currently
check.
using a third-party service that does a fantastic job. So yeah, but I was unaware that it's built into Microsoft. That's excellent, but we're on E3, so we don't have access to it. Might be why I haven't seen it.
Yeah, probably. I appreciate it. Thank you, Travis. Okay, so talked about a lot of different things here today, you guys, right? We talked about information protection. Now we're talking about phishing. We're talking about app protection policies. We're talking about identity management. Okay, these are all central, very, very important pieces of your security program that need to be taken into account. Now, that being said, you also need to be able to have a way to measure all of the data that's coming in as a part of your organization, right? So I got a polling question for everybody here, something to think about, something to really, evaluate. Think about your organization, what you're doing today. Do you have tools that can help you measure your security KPIs? Do you have a service that can actually perform this function to really be that helping hand for driving impact when it comes to security? I have something that I think, and it's really cutting edge, guys. It's something that has really taken the industry by storm, in my opinion. And I think it's something that's going to continue to evolve and really become a central piece here of the security program. And that's Azure Sentinel. Has anyone ever heard of Azure Sentinel before? Okay, that's good. If you guys haven't heard of Azure Sentinel before, I think this is going to be a really cool experience, I'm hoping, for you. And the reason that I say that is, I want to basically show you how you can take advantage here of Azure Sentinel to really drive forward your, your abilities inside of your organization when it comes to holistically understanding your security posture. Okay, so let me go ahead. I'll share my screen here just so you can kind of see this. Okay, and maybe I'll go ahead and click. Let's see if I can create just a slideshow to make this easier from the beginning. Okay, can you guys still see this Sentinel? Do you see that on your screen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, cool. All right. So let me go ahead and just kind of walk through this. Okay, this is just like a click through guide just to kind of give you an example of, some of the different capabilities. Really what Azure Sentinel is all about is it's about evaluating all the data that's streaming in, not just inside of Microsoft. That's a very big distinction that I want to make clear here. This is not just for Microsoft. This is holistically across your entire stack of security, right? Do you have data flowing in from your Azure environment, from even AWS, from a different third-party service? All of that, assuming you have the right connectors, okay, data connectors you can see here, which is one of these pieces. Assuming you're able to connect this information here into Sentinel, we're actually going to be able to go ahead and pull information from all these different sources, right? So for example, in this scenario, right, we might want to go ahead and pull information from our Azure AD, right? Maybe we kind of want to see how Azure Active Directory has been playing a role inside of our security program and how people have been interacting with it, right? We can use this Sentinel capability to basically evaluate our sign-ins, to evaluate how people are accessing this information by, again, pulling in data and streaming it into our Azure Sentinel service from Azure Active Directory, right? Or maybe it's not from Azure Active Directory. Maybe we've got some IoT services that we're using and we want to stream in that data into our Sentinel program as well. So you can see here, I'll go ahead and just kind of click through this. I can also take a look here at Azure Defender for IoT, right? So what are some of the key data points that I'm able to evaluate here by connecting that information to Sentinel, and how can I use that as a way to, again, evaluate my overall security posture? We also have this concept of workbooks, right? How can we draw security insights with these custom workbooks that we're creating inside of Azure Sentinel, right? These workbooks are essentially going to be a way for us to really evaluate the different information that we're pulling here. Okay, so you can see here, just to kind of give you an example, maybe I want to have a workbook that's specifically geared here to evaluate my Azure AD sign-in logs. Right, so this workbook is going to be essentially organizing and communicating data insights that I'm gathering from this connection that I established with Azure Active Directory to give me some more insights into the information that's getting pulled around Azure AD. Okay, so I can see here we've got basically a sign-in analysis from all the total sign-ins I've had, the success rate, the failures, the locations even where this is happening. This is all really, really cool. And again, you can customize this to really fit your needs. On top of that, once I'm able to actually have, a better understanding of this data, maybe I want to actually do some analytics here, right? And I want to be able to evaluate all of the different attacks, all the different incidents that I've identified based on this data analysis that I can really dive into a little bit deeper and hopefully infuse things like machine learning to better understand the threat that's currently at our doorstep, right? Because as we're analyzing these threats, I need to be able to very quickly understand what are the incidents that I'm identifying, and on top of that, what are the responses that I have in place for these incidents after I conduct these thorough investigations, right? So you can see here there's a spot inside of this actual dashboard where I can take a look at all the different incidents that are involved here inside of my specific Sentinel environment, right? In this case, right, I'm selecting on one specific one where people actually signed in. It looks like a user signed in from a Tor IP address. And so that's obviously going to cause a lot of different issues in regards to really understanding who's accessing this actual information. And I can actually see a web of how this is actually impacted and taking place with other related alerts that have to do with other data I've pulled from my Microsoft 365 and my overall security posture. Right, you see, we can really evaluate this to hopefully understand this. We can run queries to pull as much information that we're looking for, and ultimately just have a very simple way to evaluate this incident and really dive into the capabilities and the threats that these pose for our business. If I wanted to also dive in further, I did want to let you know we have hunting capabilities with Azure Sentinel as well, right? We can have built-in hunting queries. We can create our own bookmarks, our own notebooks to automate this investigation so that when we actively have these incidents and we want to pull as much data as possible, remember, this is connecting data across your entire security infrastructure. And so you can do these hunting capabilities to really dive in even further based on the other data that you might have pulled from other sources that might be specifically integrated with this incident that's impacting your business, right? And again, the point here that I'm trying to show you is that when we're able to aggregate all this information, we're able to build out these notebooks to actively have a way to basically investigate and respond to these threats. It's going to automate our security. It's going to make us better at detecting and hopefully investigating and resolving these threats. And ultimately, I think keep our organization more secure, especially from the myriad of different opportunities we have to be impacted when it comes to security, right? There's even communities here, right? So if you wanted to basically have access to more information, take a look at some blogs, some articles that kind of talk through some of the things you might be thinking about, that is awesome. But let me show you, again, a little bit deeper into how granular this can go, right? In this specific case, we're looking at entity behavior. Because remember, we've been looking at Azure Active Directory, how that's been impacting our business. And what we're doing here now is I can dive in even deeper by, again, evaluating all of the different data that's associated with this specific scenario. In this case, remember, we were looking at that IP address that was associated with the Tor address. And so I can see, if I take a look, this IP address is associated with our Anet user. And I can actually see, because I have all this data aggregated for me, I can see all the different activity that's actually taken place with this Anet account. And if any of this looks a little, fishy, right? For example, if I go to this next piece here, take a look at this. As I'm investigating, I can actually see all of the different activities that's been taking place from this user account, right? This is absolutely not normal. This is a massive red flag. And so again, we're using the capabilities of all of these different analysis tools and all this aggregated data to really give us a thorough understanding of these threats and how we can combat them in order to protect our business, right? So, overall, I think if I'm going to say anything about Sentinel, it's really just a phenomenal security and event management tool that I think will be something that for all of us, regardless of what services we're using, because again, this integrates with a lot of the different services you're currently using today, whether that be a different cloud provider, a different security program. I mean, this is just, next level. This is something that is really bringing the power of data, the power of understanding in regards to your business to this to your organization. And when we understand our data, when we understand our business as best as possible, we're putting ourselves in a position to hopefully be able to combat the threats that we are basically getting in contact with. So very, 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 very powerful tool here, you guys. I am super excited to be able to share that with you because I think it's something that's going to continue to really grow in popularity, and kind of run through that further. Abid, did you want to jump in here? I see your comment here. Did I miss something here that you think I should have mentioned for the team here?
No, I think you covered it well, Andre. Good job. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody have any questions here on Sentinel? Do you guys have something currently like this? I mean, I'd love to get some feedback there, because I think this is a really, really impactful. I mean, if you're trying to think about ROI and, streamlining security to be able to manage it from one single pane of glass, first thing you should be thinking about is something like Azure Sentinel. Anybody have any comments, any thoughts? I'd love to hear any feedback on what you guys think. All right. Well, hold up. Actually, I think I just saw a comment. We have a third-party system that's similar, but I'll be looking into the build-in one. Yeah, absolutely. I think, regardless of what SIEM solution you're using, I think this is something that is very, very important for your business. I obviously recommend Azure Sentinel because I've got experience with it and I really like it. And I just think it's something that, for a lot of us can really provide a lot of impact in regards to protecting our environment against the different types of threats that can impact our business. Now, with that being said, we talked about a lot of really good things here. We talked about, the different layers that are a part of our Microsoft 365 solution, how those all integrate to hopefully protect your business. Why is security important? I just want to highlight this again. Security is constantly evolving. I've said this a million times today, and the reason for that is because it's one of the most important things to really grasp. If you did, some work a year ago and you think that has protected you to today, it probably has to a certain degree, but there's probably a lot of other things that have changed and have evolved that you specifically as an organization should be evaluating and understanding, assessing. Am I currently up to date with my security program? And if not, how can I ensure that I'm doing this in a way that's going to be effective, in a way that's going to be impactful for my business, right? These are all things that we absolutely need to be talking about. And so the reason this is relevant, the reason I'm bringing this up is because if you have not done some type of workshop, some type of assessment here in recent times, you're putting yourself in at a much higher level of risk because of the fact that security is probably not the same since you've actually, done that work previously. I'm going to go ahead and bring Abid in here just to kind of give a little bit of description here and kind of talk to one of the options you have here, given that you've been able to come here to this lab as a next step to really evaluate where you currently stand for your business.
Yeah, thanks, Andre. Yeah, so thank you again, everyone, for joining the workshop today. One of the things I want to, I've been kind of watching the chat, and there's been a lot of good, interaction from the audience. So thank you, all for attending and asking the really good questions around the kind of the challenges in terms of just infrastructure security you're going through, or with this M365, Azure Information Protection, email, web protection, or whatever the case may be, including even Security Center and Sentinel and the scope. So if you guys, Cambay Consulting is a partner, gold partner of Azure, since over a year plus, and we've been in business for almost 10, 15 years, as you saw in the beginning of the call. So even as you kind of going through these exercises and evaluating these services from Azure and M365, feel free to reach out to us. We're here to do like an assessment. Sometimes many of these are actually free assessments at no cost to you, for about 40 hours of consultation. So on a case-by-case basis, we can do those for you, and that'll help you kind of evaluate, what your existing environment looks like from a security posture, and where you can go, in the future, and make sure that your environment is secure moving forward, right? So reach out to us. We'll put an email in the chat window for you guys to reach out to us through, directly or even through Prancer. And again, thank you once again for taking the time for attending the workshop today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, it's a lot of hours of work that, we just wanted to give an opportunity here, given that you guys took the time here just to kind of run through this opportunity for you guys to really take this to the next step. I think as business, consultants, as organizations that are really involved here in the process of securing our organization, we need to be thinking about security holistically and how we're evolving and how we're getting better every single day. So, with that being said, it's been an absolute pleasure to be here with everybody today. I'm hoping that you learned something. I talked about a lot of different things from a broad context, but even in this hour and a half, there's absolutely no way for me to cover the full breadth of what Microsoft 365 can represent for your business. A lot of different layers to this, a lot of different things that you need to be considering. But more than anything, hopefully I can show you that, the tools that Microsoft 365 provides you are unparalleled. A lot of really good information, a lot of really good resources that will be beneficial and effective for your organization. So, with that being said, thanks again so much for taking the time here. There is a couple minutes here in case you guys have any other questions. But if not, we'll make sure to follow up with every one of you. And I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Thanks again for all the time. And I hope you guys learned something. Thank you, everybody. All right. Doesn't look like there's any questions, you guys. So really appreciate it. Stay safe, take care, and hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Talk soon.
Thank you, Andres. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Fainan.